All right, everybody. It's so great to see all of you. I'm Gayle Goldin. I'm a state senator in Rhode Island. And welcome tonight to the Womxn Project is this fantastic panel tonight on called She Should Smile More. And what we want to talk about tonight with all these amazing elected officials is the experiences we've had running for office, getting there, being in office, what that has meant, and what the challenges are that we face and the barriers we face, but also what a value it is to have so many women running and winning office across the country right now. I'm excited tonight to be joined by this amazing panel, and we're going to kick it off in just a moment. But the first thing I want to say, if you happen to be listening to this live, is tonight is the night before the Rhode Island primary. This is an incredibly important day tomorrow. We hope you have, if you've not already voted by mail or early voted in person, you absolutely can go vote tomorrow, as long as you're a registered voter. If you don't know where to go to vote, go to vote.ri.gov and you can see your polling location. Please keep in mind, because of COVID, some of those polling locations have changed. So you really should check if you haven't gone. If you're holding on to a mail ballot, you absolutely can turn it in tomorrow in person, either at the Board of Elections or the Board of Canvassers in your town. There are mail drop sites and other places. Go to that website, vote.ri.gov. It'll tell you everything you need to know about how you can vote tomorrow. And if you go in person, don't forget your ID and also a mask. All right, so now that I've given you my very important pitch to go vote, go vote, go vote. And if you live in my district and know you don't have a primary tomorrow is a perfect day to fill out your application for a mail ballot application for the November election. And now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. We have this exciting group elected on city and state level across the country. So impressive in so many of the things that they have done. And, we are really talking about what it means to be women who run for office and the barriers we face to running and what happens once we get elected. And so I'm going to kick off tonight by asking each panelist to introduce themselves and what elected office you hold as well, and where you're located. And then the question that so many people watching this, I'm sure, are wondering is really, when was the first time that somebody told you you should smile more? Or what is an experience that you have had where people have made an expectation about because of your gender, race, gender identity, that affects the way that you present yourself as an elected official that you've had to deal with? So I'm going to start off with Sharon, because I'm just going in alphabetical order by last name. So Sharon, I will kick it up to you.
Thank you very much, Gayle. My name is Sharon Brackett. I'm an elected member of the Baltimore City Democratic State Central Committee, which is actually a party position as opposed to a representative in the legislature or something like that. I was elected in 2018, first time I've ever run for anything in my life. And I have the somewhat dubious honor of being the first out trans person elected to any office in the state of Maryland. So you can imagine that was kind of an interesting experience for me. And by profession, I'm an engineer, hence all the various paraphernalia you see sitting around me, various projects and things. I will say that being an out trans person and deciding that you wanted to run for public office certainly allows the opportunity to put a jacket full of targets on it. But I would say that I was blessed by the confidence of Democrats in the city of Baltimore, and they elected to vote for me regardless of that history. And as I like to indicate to people, I like to think that being trans is the least interesting thing about me. But being a trans woman, it's very interesting because not only are you perhaps judged on your demeanor and your interest, your ability to smile and conform, but even just being a woman is somehow questioned by certain individuals. And so there are a whole number of challenges that I'm hypersensitive to with respect to interacting with people. But you know what? It didn't stop me from knocking doors. I was received very well, and didn't hide the fact that I was trans. And really, I mean, if that's truly a showstopper for you, then maybe I'm not your candidate. And I'm quite okay with that, because there are plenty of people who are. That's all I got right now.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that very unique perspective, and for taking on that challenge in the first place. So who next is Monica Duran in Colorado?
Hi, Gayle. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. So I'm Monica Duran. I represent House District 24 in Jefferson County in Colorado. And I would have to say, for me, I'm a domestic violence survivor and a once homeless single mom. And when I had made the decision to publicly put that out there, because I knew, running, this would be part of my platform, and there wasn't any reason not to share this. But when I was approached by several different folks saying to me, really sorry about your situation, but how can you really hold down a job if you were homeless? They spun it in a negative way. So I had never heard that before. I'd never thought about it in a negative way. Yes, there was a stigma. Yes, it was hard to overcome that. But to say that I could not be a state representative because of the fact that I was a domestic violence survivor and homeless did not cross my mind on the ability to be able to hold a position. So that was an awakening, but also made me more determined than ever to prove that they were wrong. I was homeless because of my domestic violence situation, because I was getting out of an abusive, life-threatening marriage, that I became homeless. So that was a challenge, but at the same time, I kind of felt that for those who questioned that, obviously didn't understand. And it was my opportunity to educate them and to show them and explain the reasons, ifs, ands, and whys with that. So that's probably one of the biggest. Obviously, as a Latina woman, there are other obstacles that I've dealt with, but for right now, that was the one that I had to deal with really the most during my election.
Thank you. I think that's such a powerful point, that when we are constantly asked to put ourselves out and be vulnerable and tell our own stories as elected officials and people who are in the political process, and when those are used against us, that is really difficult. And yet owning it and being able to put it forward as a strength is what makes us really connect with voters. So thanks so much for sharing that. I'm going to turn it over to Nirva LaFortune, who represents the part of the city council that overlaps with my Senate district in Providence. Nirva.
Yes, Senator Goldin is my senator. Hello, everyone. My name is Nirva LaFortune. I'm a Providence City Council member representing Ward 3. I'm a Providence native. However, I was not born in Providence. I came to the United States at the age of 3. I am, I believe, the first formally undocumented person to be elected to City Council, the first Haitian American to be elected in the state of Rhode Island. So for me, it's been an interesting journey, and I still remember running. And one thing that came up, I'm a single parent of 2. My son just started his first week of college last week at Rutgers University, and my daughter is in 10th grade. But I remember someone calling me and other people calling and asking, but that specific person said to me, well, how are you going to run for office in a full-time job and take care of your children? And I thought to myself, no one asks men that question. And I was the only female running against all male opponents. And I don't think any of them received those types of questions. And it's interesting because there's an assumption that you can't balance, but yet I've been a single parent, I've worked, I was in grad school, while I was running. I'm done with my graduate education at Brown. And yet I still managed to run for office, win, raise more money than all my male opponents, and I did well during the election. So there's all these assumptions about women and their ability, but for me, it was really important to run because one, I could show other young women that you don't have to fit a certain cookie cutter image to be an elected official or to work in politics. For us to have true representation, we need people who come from various backgrounds, whether they're immigrants, whether they're single moms, whether they're in, transgender in 2-family homes. We should have representation of all kind. But it's been a journey. Thank you.
Yeah, I bet it was not the same person, but I was also asked that same question, and I am married, and I was still asked at the doors who would take care of my children when I first ran, and they were younger than yours. So thank you for sharing that story. And we're going to turn it over now to Dafna, who's also in Colorado. Talk about your experience.
Hi, I'm State Representative Dafna Michaelson-Jenet. I represent Colorado's House District 30, which is in Adams County, Colorado. And we yesterday were rained on with ash from the fires that are just north of us right now. So we're all paying close attention. My daughter goes to CSU in Fort Collins, which is right near the fire. So we're all very focused on that right now. And so just a little hope and prayer for everyone to come out safely, and for the snow that we're going to have after our 100-degree temperatures today to put out the fires tomorrow. Yay. So you asked the question of, were we told or asked to smile more? Smiling is my default. I have resting smile face, and I'm sure I was raised to have resting smile face, but there you have it. I have resting smile face, and now the whole world knows. But what I was asked that was really distressing to me was I was told I had to change my name. I was told that my name was too ethnic and no one would vote for a Dafna because what is a Dafna? And, I was told this a number of years ago, actually. I ran in 16, so it was 2014, 2015 when we were coming around to try to run. I was told I had to change my name, and I was told that I couldn't wear, I used to wear, and actually it's not on right now because I'm not leaving the house, but a Star of David on my bracelet. And I was told I would have to take off the Star of David because they didn't want people to know that I was Jewish. And I thought, first of all, I'm not changing my name because my name is such an important component of me. It's me, Second of all, I told everybody I was running for office so people would learn how to say Dafna. So if I changed my name, that would really defeat the purpose. But third of all, that quiet anti-Semitism, I don't know that it would be the same for a guy. I don't know that they would have told a guy, your name is David, that's too Jewish, you have to change your name. It just never would have happened. So I'm glad I didn't change my name. People do still struggle with my name. I've been asked before, what's a Dafna? And I'd be like, I'm a Dafna. But it's a new learning experience for everyone in my district.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. I think the through lines in all of that is that all of us are experience this in slightly different ways, and people come to it in different ways and experience us in different ways, and all of that, it requires us to put some thought into how we present ourselves and how people are going to react to the way we present ourselves. So thank you so much to all of you for sharing that. There have always been these studies that show that women don't just step up to run, that they have to be asked to run, that sometimes it takes as many as 7 times to be asked to run, that women think that they need to have checked 1,000 different boxes before they would even consider the idea of running or meet some very high threshold of what is eligible to run for office. And so I would love for any one of you who want to answer, you know, how'd you make that decision to run? Did it involve people asking you? What gave you the confidence to feel like you had checked enough boxes to be able to do it?
I have a funny story, if you want to start with a funny story.
Sure.
So there was a program that used to be called the White House Project, Go Run training. And I did this Go Run training many years ago. And I remember at the end of the Go Run training, they said the same thing to us. You know, women, you know, typically have to be asked 7 times to run for office. And they made us all commit that we were going to not wait to be asked, that when our time was right, we were just going to run for office. So life went on as it does. And 10 years later, I'm in the grocery store and it's a Sunday morning. My husband is making crepes for breakfast and we ran out of milk. So I ran to the grocery store to get some milk. And the cashier was a city councilor in my city. I live in a small town. City council is considered part-time, and all of our city councilors work in the community. So he works at the King Soopers, our grocery store, and he says to me, "Hey, Dafna, I need you to run for office." And I'm like, "Hey, Steve, I'm in my pajamas." And he's like, "I don't care that you're in your pajamas. I was told that if I want more women to run for office, I had to ask them. So I'm asking you, I need you to run for office." And I remember thinking as I left the grocery store, oh no, I actually thought an expletive, but oh no, I waited to be asked. And, you know, it was that reminder that I had made this commitment that I was going to run for office one day. And there were all of these problems that I needed to solve at that very moment that were just screaming at me. If you want to change this problem, you need to be on the other side of the table. So when Steve asked me in the grocery store, I stepped up and said, okay, I'm running for office.
That's such a great story. Does anybody else want to share how they made that decision?
Sure. For me, you know, I started out on the fire board, Wheat Ridge Fire Board, and I was asked to run for that. But it's just like you said, you're asked to do something, and then you think of all the reasons, right? You make your whole list of all the reasons why I can't. And they obviously outweigh all the reasons why you can. So if we kind of move forward, I also served on Wheat Ridge City Council. And at that point, when I was asked, I had taken a training program. It was called Emerge. And I was in their first training class in 2013, which was extremely helpful for me because I was surrounded by other women who were wanting to give back in some way to their community, but didn't quite know how to do it, where to start, just kind of that kitchen table basic information. So after I got done with that training, I thought to myself, okay, I'm ready. I know what I need to do. Instead of thinking of all the reasons why I can't, let me think of the reasons why I can and why I should. And that's what I started to do. And I realized that I had a voice, and my voice needed to be heard at the Capitol, right? To be heard in a different way, because we all come from different walks of life. We all have different life stories, different experiences, and put us all together. And man, what we can do is just amazing. So it took some mind changing and rethinking. But when I had been asked to run for House District 24, it didn't take much time for me to realize that, you know what, I have something to offer and I can do it. And let me think of all the things I can do. So not that it wasn't overwhelming or kind of scary or kind of like, oh my gosh, I said yes, now I'm committed, what's next? You just kind of take a deep breath, because fear will always take you over sometimes. And you have those highs and lows that we all do. But I think going back to what I said before, hearing somebody say, I don't think you can do the job because you were homeless, just gave me more of that inspiration and that fire to say, no, I can do it and I will do it.
I know I'm often motivated in the same way. So that is great to hear that. One of the things that strikes me is that in Colorado, it's one of is it the House or the Senate? The House that's predominantly the majority women now, right?
Yeah, the House.
And so it's only there are I think Colorado and then Nevada, the full legislature is majority women, which is the first time in history that happened. But I think Colorado might be the only other state with a chamber that is majority women. There might be one more. And so this kind of feeds into the next thing I was thinking about, which is that Julie Kohler, as part of some research at the National Women's Law Center, looked at the legislatures which had more than 30% women in them in state legislatures. And what she found was Democratic women. And what she found was not only were those women more likely to get legislation passed if at least about a third of the legislature were women, but more people generally got legislation passed. So both men and women were more successful in passing legislation and making policy change happen for their districts and their communities when more women serve in the legislatures, which I just find a fascinating statistic that they were able to look at in this past legislative session. And I'm curious to think here, what do you think that means? Also, the Providence City Council is majority women. What does it mean when we change the power dynamics of who's in the room and who's part of those decision-making process? And, what lessons can we learn from that?
Well, I can say something there, even though I'm not a member of a state legislature yet. But having been on both sides of this coin, the power dynamic thing has been very interesting to me. I always tell folks, yeah, I had a prior life. Okay, I used to play for the other team, but I still have their playbook. Would you like to look at it? And one of the things that I find women are much more interested in, and it's perhaps a learned behavior, and that is that the idea is more important than who it came from. And so I find that women, including myself, are much more interested in getting a good idea moved across without necessarily worrying about getting the credit for it. And I think men in general are like, well, that was my idea. Okay, and so when you have more women around, okay, they're willing to sort of just say, let's just get the ball moving. Okay, let's work together and let's get something done. Okay, instead of simply just arguing about it. So the posturing level goes way down. Now, that's not to say that women shouldn't be tough, and a lot of them are. Okay, but I think this notion of collaboration, this idea of, okay, the thing that we're trying to get done is way important than me or my ego, I think is huge. And I think it's a reason that you need more women in legislative bodies. Frankly, it should be at least half, if not more.
Yeah, and I think to me that is really about the structure of politics as well. Because if you look at what people expect of their politician or their elected official is that they will own everything and they will take credit for everything. But in reality, that's not necessarily the most effective way to actually work together to pass the best possible laws or ordinances or whatever you're trying to work at. And that, to me, it has to do with shifting the values of what do you value as leadership? What does true leadership look like? And we have very narrowly defined political leadership. As more women are coming into office, we see that there are more opportunities to shift what leadership actually means. I don't know if other people have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just going to add also like the policies that come out. Women, the state of Rhode Island and also in our city, we see some of the policies that have come out, which policies that serve all communities and they're not just directed at one entity. And a lot of it is policies that women are working collaboratively to push out. And so women tend to, one, prioritize communities and think about also how these policies that are being developed, whether it's a legislation or ordinance or a resolution, but how that impacts those communities. Because a lot of times we create policies without really thinking about the long-term impact or how it will impact communities differently. And I think with women, there's more thought that goes into that. And you're absolutely correct. I think women tend to work more collaboratively, and it could be a natural instinct as well, because we are focused on getting things done. I guess my only little hesitation with that is only when a man tries to take the credit for something they didn't work at. That's where you have to like draw the line sometimes. But women are really hard workers, and also changing the dynamic. I think the lesson that we also learn from that is that not only are we showing that women can lead, we are proving it's possible, and it will encourage more girls and more women to run for office because they'll see how effective they can be, and they also have models. Part of why I think, and for me, women, you don't see as many women running for office is because we just don't see a lot of women in elected positions. And so the more women we elect, because majority of our voters are usually women, we're super voters, the more people you'll notice, especially young women, running for office. And we're the ones who are going to help cultivate that new group of people who are going to run for state office, run for mayor, run for governor, run to be the next president of the United States one day. But we need to have models in these positions in order for other women to see that, and it can inspire them to do the same.
Yeah. Dafna or Monica?
You know, I would just add, not to repeat, I mean, all great points here, that it's really important to have leaders that look like all of us, right? When I look, and when I was in school and I was always involved in student government, I very rarely saw anyone that looked like me. And I think it's really important that, yes, we're great collaborators, we're great negotiators. We kind of set our goal and we work on that, but I think it's really important to see that there are leaders out there that look like us. So these young women coming up that think they can't do it, or for some reason have that list like I had of why I shouldn't, start removing some of those reasons why they shouldn't, because they see us, all of us, diverse and strong and opinionated, but yes, we're hard workers, and they say I could do it too. So I think that's important also.
I'll just add that since 2017, which was my first year in service, we were a majority female body, and I've served under 2 female speakers. And so I'm surrounded by incredible female leadership all the time. And it has been a truly tremendous and awe-inspiring experience. And we've been told year after year that we've passed a record number of legislation. So it is definitely proving out, to your point.
Yeah, great. Well, that's so great to hear. So I want to shift a little bit. You know, of course, we're all thinking presidential politics as well in all of this. And we are at a historic moment. You know, I think the Democratic presidential cycle was historic to begin with, just in terms of who was actually running and how diverse a group was actually put themselves forward, and how much credibility was behind every single person who was running, and just, you know, hearing different voices and different experiences in the presidential race in a way that I don't really recall in my lifetime. So I think that was a very different presidential cycle that we had for the Democratic primary. And now we, of course, have Senator Harris on the ticket, the vice president ticket, and should Biden and Harris win, she will be making history. And so, you know, you've all talked about this a little bit, but like, what do you think that really means for our country to have not only her on the ticket, but then should that, you know, hopefully win, what will that mean for us as a nation? And what does it mean for other women?
You know, we talk about breaking that glass ceiling all the time. And Hillary had broken that glass ceiling by becoming the nominee. And so many of us were so sure that she was going to be our first female president, and that didn't come to pass, sadly. I think, quite frankly, we're in an it's about damn time period. You know, like it's ridiculous already. I just, we look around the world and we see so many powerful female world leaders, and we here in the United States can't summon up the energy to vote for a woman as our leader. I don't understand it anymore. And I guess with this ticket, I don't have any room for the conversation that, well, we need a woman, so we have to vote for her. No, you have to vote for her because she's a qualified candidate. And the fact that she's a woman shouldn't even be an issue for you.
You know what that will mean for our country is that we're finally, if they win, that we're finally going to get real leadership back in the White House, and we can get Trump out. So that's what's important to me. And you're right about she's the qualified candidate. The reality is that she's done the work. She has experience. She's amazing. I just think she's extremely intelligent and poised. And that whole ticket is representative of so many people living in our country. One, we will have a Black woman, a Black woman, not from Harvard University, but from Howard University in the White House, serving as the Vice President of the United States. That in itself, to think about what we're living through right now in the years of systemic racism and oppression against Black and Brown communities, this will forever change our political landscape. So it is, not only is it important to elect them and to ensure that they win, but it's going to change history. And the other thing too is that people tend to bring up the whole topic around identity politics. There are politicians that are too focused on identity politics. The reality, the problem is that it's not those politicians who are constantly focused on their identity, because I'm a woman, yes, I'm a Black woman, yes, but I would rather someone pay attention to my qualifications, to my ability, than focus on my gender or my race. And for Kamala Harris, I think it's the same. She is a qualified person. Let's put away her gender. Let's put aside her race, her background, her ethnicity, and focus on her strengths, focus on her background, focus on the work that she's done. And the reality is she is a qualified candidate, so we should focus on that, because we don't tend to use identity politics when it comes to men. It's something that women constantly experience, and it's the community, it's the voters that are bringing it up. It's not the person running for office who wants that to be a priority, because what we want you to see is us as a candidate, as a viable candidate who's running against everyone else.
So I'm super enthused by this team. To be honest, I started out as a Liz Warren fan, okay, but that was not in the cards for this go around, and that's okay. The thing that I see that I'm very excited about is that, when Joe Biden was vice president with President Obama, it really was a team. Okay. I mean, I know Obama was our leader, but he really counted on Joe as sort of a sounding board and an asset. And I think Joe learned that lesson in earnest. And so that's the thing I'm enthusiastic about is that he's going to be taking Senator Harris, hopefully Vice President Harris, and using her in ways that we've not seen before. She's not going to be just someone who occupies the mansion at the Naval Observatory. Okay, she's going to be out there. She's going to be moving policy along. Okay, and she already knows where most of the knobs in the Senate are. Between the two of them, they know how to get legislation passed. And that's going to be huge because hopefully we'll bring the Senate along on the coattails here and actually make some real change in our country. So I'm really enthused. She represents, You know, I know we talk about identity politics, but she represents so many of us in so many different ways that I just can't imagine how she will not be successful. Now, what I find fascinating are the attacks that are coming in from the right. It's like at the same time as being too liberal, she's very law and order. I don't know which it is. Can we choose one? All right. You can't have it both ways, guys. Okay. You know, yes, she came from an attorney general's role. She knows the job of being the government's lawyer instead of the lawyer for a particular person who's been elected to office. Okay, so I can imagine that she'll be involved looking at what happened in this Trump presidency at some point in time. But, you know, she's got all of the chops. Joe Biden has said he believes himself to be a transitional figure. Quite frankly, I think he's setting the table for her for something maybe that happens in 2024. And I think that's okay too.
Yeah, just to add, you know, dittos to everything everyone has said here. And we are breaking glass ceilings in one way or another we are, but the bottom line is she's qualified. She's qualified to run, qualified to be there. I'm excited to have her voice there, as many of us are excited, right? The country's watching. So many people are watching and they're just excited. And you know what? We've got to vote like our life depends on it, because it does. And I'm excited to see her there. Agree with everything all of you have said, but yeah, it is about darn time. It's 2021. What is taking so damn long here? So I'm ready.
Yeah, I think this just coincidentally is the anniversary of the day I was in DC. I was in the room for the Kavanaugh hearings for just a few hours. And, you know, I watched Senator Harris do her questioning, part of her questioning. And I have such a, I mean, all of them were phenomenal, but sort of the idea of seeing her not holding back on the rage that she most certainly felt during that interview, as well as Senator Klobuchar having that rage as well. And like that they could embrace that in doing their jobs and didn't have to contain it in terms of trying to control something based on public perception, but we're actually leading with both their intellect and their experience of the moment. And it was incredible to see in person. And so I'm very grateful for her role in those hearings, as well as thinking that she will bring with her a sense of justice that I think is really interesting and will be part of what's a voice and a partnership that is absolutely going to be an important part to Biden administration. So I was asked this the other day in an interview, and I've certainly been asked it many times, and I feel like I never have a good answer to this. So I'm asking it to all of you to see what your answers are. So, thinking about your experience in the role that you have now, what do you wish you had known before going into this that would have maybe shaped what you chose to do differently, or would make you feel more relaxed or empowered, or whatever it is that would open something up for you? And at the same time, partnered with that, what advice would you have for women who are thinking about running for office but are not quite there yet?
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, when I think about it, there isn't anything I would change, because if I changed anything, then that would have changed probably my journey. And for me, the journey is so important when you're going through this. So I wouldn't have known what to ask at that time, right? And I wouldn't have changed it, because I learned a lot. I gained a lot of strength through the process, really learned a lot about myself, but learned more about the people I surrounded myself with. So I wouldn't change anything there. And if any advice I could give would be to not give up. Not give up. Don't take no for an answer. You're the decision maker. You're the one in charge of your path and your journey. You alone. Yes, it takes a village and it takes a support system to get you there, but never give up. And you know what? It doesn't take 7 times to be asked. You don't have to be asked 7 times anymore. If you're asked, and you don't even have to be asked, if there's something you're interested in, something you want to go for, just do it. The worst thing that can happen, and I've been in a situation where I've lost a race, but you know what? To me, I didn't lose because I learned something through that process too, right? I gained something to take with me for the next time I attempted something. So I would just say not to give up. Keep focused on what your dreams and your goals are and making that change you want to make, and learn from everyone that you come in contact with and every experience you have, because that kind of shapes and molds you as you're on your journey. That's what I would say. That's what I did for myself.
That's great advice. And I love that idea that it's, this is a journey and this involves us getting to know ourselves better. And that's part of the journey, and that you wouldn't want to change that. That's such a great answer. Does anybody else have thoughts on what you wish you had known, or what advice you might have for somebody who's considering running?
I agree. I don't think for me, I don't think I would change anything as well. I'm still learning. It is a journey, and you're constantly learning something new. You're finding yourself down paths, or trying to deviate a road, or take another detour. So it's a learning experience, and through that learning experience, you're also growing throughout the journey. One advice that I would give someone is, one, you should smile more if you only feel like it, because you don't have to always smile. Sometimes you have to put on your game face, and or your poker face, or whatever it is. And so you don't have to go in every situation with a smile on your face. But I agree that you don't have to wait for someone to ask you to run for office, because there isn't a certain image of or definition of what an elected official should be. The fact is, there's an elected official in every single one of us. It's about us making the decision, or the individual making the decision to run or not to run. And the one thing I remember an advice a friend gave me when I was contemplating running, and I clearly remember I had a marathon. It was the Providence Marathon, and a couple of people had asked, and I was processing it, and I decided, well, I have 26.2 miles to go, so this gives me something to think about and not this actual marathon. And I remember when I got out the car that evening after, or that late afternoon after my run, and we were talking, she said, Nirva, the worst thing that could happen is that you lose, and then if you choose to run again, you could do it. And that's what I put in my head, that if I lose, I lose, but at least I tried, and I won't have any regrets, because I can't say that I never tried running for office. So you don't have to wait for someone to tell you that you're good enough to run, because there isn't any type of definition of an elected official. We all have the capability of running. Just seek advice from people, talk to other elected officials, talk to your community, because the community is it's the people who vote you into office. So you're representing them. You're bringing their ideas, their needs to the table. So the most important people that you really should be engaging with are the people that you are going to represent, because they get to decide who they want to help elevate their voices and their concerns. But again, there's no definition of what an elected official can be, because they elected, that person in the White House now, and he definitely is not qualified for that position. So anyone could run.
So I want to say, I'm glad I'm not the only person on the call who got photobombed by their dog. I guess, it's not so much a regret. It's more just of identification of something that I wish I had started sooner. Okay, that, you know, I'd put obstacles in the way. Well, I've got to do this first, and I have to have that success first, and I've got some kind of dues I have to pay over here, and there's some other process that's involved. And you know, I ran in 2018 because I was absolutely horrified by what happened in 2016. And I said, okay, if not now, then when? Okay. And so I would encourage, if you have the inklings for this sort of thing, you don't have to wait. You can get started now. And you don't need to be 40 or 50 years old to sort of make your mark in the universe. I think that's one thing that AOC has sort of identified for a lot of us is, oh, you know what? I can have this background and I can be a representative in Congress. Okay, so I would just encourage you that if you have interest and inkling, go do it. Don't let someone tell you that you've got to jump through a bunch of hoops or meet some set of requirements before you run. The world is starved for competence and nature abhors a vacuum. Run.
I'm just going to echo a little bit of what Sharon said and say, I wish I would have known that I had the skill set to do this. But before I got into office, I didn't know what this really was. And all the training programs that I took trained me how to run for office. They didn't train me how to be a legislator, but I learned quickly that my life had trained me how to be a legislator. Being a parent trained me how to be a legislator more than anything else in the whole wide world. I say often, I have a son who's narrowly on the spectrum. Learning how to talk to my son who was narrowly on the spectrum were all the skills you needed to work with everybody on the legislative floor. All the different pieces of my background and my history are what put it together to make me be that type of team builder that you need to have to be able to pass legislation. And I think if more women recognize that the work that they do on a daily basis is really training them all the time to be a legislator, I think we'd see more women running and sooner. And like Sharon said, you know, I am 47 years old, and I look around at all these young women who are on the floor with me, and I wish that I had had the gumption when I was younger so that I would have more time before me to continue to do this amazing work.
That's so great. Yeah, I absolutely. I think that, you know, I, as I'm sure all of you do, get asked to come in and speak to different groups, but particularly when I go to schools to talk about what it means to be a legislator. And so I'll ask by asking students, what do they think you need to be have the qualifications to be in the state legislature? And they often come up with really fantastic answers. I'm like, actually, you just have to be the right age and live in the district where you're going to run. That's pretty much the only requirement, and to be a U.S. citizen. So like the qualifications are so narrow. And if you think about our entire experiences, that is actually what trains us to be in the legislature and gives us skills that are completely different than the average 56-year-old white man, which is what the average legislature across this country is comprised of. And so we really are bringing forward a different experience, and what that means is there are different results in the way that we legislate and what we focus on. So we're at 7:01, so I want to just throw out a moment here to see if there's any questions you would like to ask each other, or any last thoughts you'd like to have before we close up our discussion tonight.
You know, I just had this thought. You know, we often ask women sometimes to look at other men who are elected officials, and I think we need to also tell our young males and our older males who are running for office or who are in office to also look at women leaders and adapt some of their behaviors, and look at the way they design policy, and adapt some of those strategies so that they can be more effective leaders. I think they could learn a lot from women who are in leadership position.
Yeah, that is such a good point. Early on in my legislative career, I was sent to like an emerging leaders leadership program at UVA with other state legislators across the country. And there was all this, training on leadership. And at one point I turned to one of the faculty members and I said, every book you have assigned is about a masculine identified version of what leadership is. It's not actually looking at collaborative work or consensus building or anything that might actually be different than the traditional view of what leadership is. And not necessarily that you need to be a woman to do it. It's just defined leadership so narrowly. And I feel like if we continue to define leadership in that way, then we are leaving so much power and experience, pushing it to the side, and we are forever holding us back as a nation. Other ideas anybody wants to throw out there?
I would love for women to know that they should reach out to a woman they know who's in office. Your state legislatures, your city councilors, they're really accessible. And so if there's a woman out there that you know of who's holding a position in elected office, call that woman, ask her to be your mentor. I think you'll be surprised to find that even though she's incredibly busy, she's going to say yes. And recognize that for other elected officials, that we have to keep building the bench. Have you identified who's going to run after your term limited, if you have term limits in your state, or after you decide that you're done with this position, if that's the case? Find another woman to hold your seat after you. I think those are the two things that I'd love to end with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I just had a conversation this weekend about succession, right? How do we build that? And we need to make sure that we do, so that I'm not the last Latina woman to hold my seat. And that starts from school boards, fire boards, city councils, all the way up to engage. And mentorship is extremely important, Dafna. So I'm glad you brought that up, because any one of us can find the time to mentor someone who's interested or even thinking about it, right? And that can make the difference between them deciding to go forward or them deciding not to. So those are all great points. Mentorship, succession, because we want to build a bench from the bottom up.
I guess the last point I'll make is, and I think it's a critical one, diversity is a strength. It is not a weakness. And as you can tell, even just by looking at this panel that we have here, we have a very diverse panel, people from different backgrounds, but we're all women, and we're all fighting for the same types of things. We're fighting for families, we're fighting for fairness, we're fighting for equity. And I think that's the right message going forward to the future. And I encourage more women to run for office. And please, everyone, by all means, vote in any manner in which you can that you are comfortable with. Please vote. People talk about not having power. Well, this is the one lever you can grab that has power, all right, amongst all of us. Please go out and vote. We need your vote. There's a primary tomorrow in Rhode Island. I didn't know that until just now. So please get out there and vote in the primary, or send in your ballot, or drop it off at wherever, whatever the rules are within your own state. Okay. But when we vote, we win.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. If you're in Rhode Island, please vote in the primary. Also remember, November, everybody else, if you're in a state that we're probably the last primary state. But if not, be sure to pay attention to that. And certainly in November to get those mail ballots in as soon as possible if you're in a state where that's possible. In Rhode Island, it's absolutely everybody can request a mail ballot. You just need to go to vote.ri.gov in order to get the application, turn it in before October 13th. And then you can get a mail ballot back that you can vote in November. We are on the cusp of seeing change in our country, just in a moment in which we have had perhaps one of the most complex years emotionally as a country, where each one of us are processing trauma very differently, and also collectively, as we are both going through COVID and a reckoning on civil rights and in racism, and as we head into the 2020 election. I think so many of us feel like there's so much riding on that in terms of feeling like we are moving towards some semblance of feeling like 2021 can turn a new leaf and we can learn from this experience collectively and start healing as a nation next year. That obviously will be a huge, huge step forward to be able to do that, but it's incredibly important. And the one place we are absolutely all equal is in the voting booth. So please do go in and vote. Your vote counts just the same as everybody else's. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us tonight. This was wonderful. Thank you to anyone who was joining us on Facebook watching live. And thank you to the Womxn Project for hosting this conversation tonight. There's a whole series of them, so please keep up with the Womxn Project to look at more of those. And then if you are in Rhode Island right now, starting at 8:30, Womxn Project will be doing one of their projections up on the State House in Providence tonight, just to keep that conversation going about what it means to make sure our voices are heard in the voting booth and in elections. So thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.